When my phone rang that night, I almost didn't answer. It was 2:13 a.m., and the house felt too big for just me. I remember the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock above the stove, and the faint echo of rain tapping against the kitchen window. When I finally swiped to pick up, the voice on the other end trembled. "Mrs. Diane, it's me. It's Leah." Leah. The girl I had trained, coached, and practically mothered. The girl who stole my husband. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. Then she whispered, I don't know who else to call. And that was how everything, the pride, the hurt, the years of silence, cracked open again. Normal life/setup. Before all that, my life looked ordinary. Comfortable, even. I was a senior project manager at a mid-sized marketing firm, the kind of place where birthdays meant grocery store cake and long workdays ended with cheap wine in paper cups. I'd worked there 15 years. The office was my second home. Leah joined us fresh out of college, bright-eyed, too eager, with a portfolio full of raw ideas and typos. I was assigned as her mentor. She reminded me of myself when I was 22, hopeful, anxious to please, convinced that kindness alone could get you through the world. I used to call her kiddo. She'd hover by my desk, scribbling notes while I explained campaign strategies. I'd correct her gently, tease her about her messy bun, bring her coffee when I noticed she'd skipped lunch. My husband, Thomas, often teased me about her. "Another one of your strays," he'd joke as I packed extra lunch to bring for her. Thomas was a quiet man. He'd been a literature teacher before switching to freelance writing. His humor was dry, his voice low, the kind of tone that made you lean in to catch every word. We'd been married 13 years. No children, though we'd tried. Instead, our lives filled with routines, morning coffee on the porch, crossword puzzles, long drives on Sundays. For years, I believed we were steady. Not fiery, but steady, the kind of love that hums quietly in the background, like the steady buzz of the refrigerator light. Leah became like family. When her mother passed unexpectedly, I was the one who drove her to the funeral, who sat beside her in that cold church and held her trembling hands. I introduced her to Thomas at a company barbecue. She spilled ketchup on his shirt within 5 minutes, mortified, but he only laughed and told her he liked the color red. After that, she started dropping by the house sometimes, ostensibly for mentorship talks. We'd all sit around the dining table, the smell of my chicken stew filling the room. Thomas would ask her about her career goals, her love life, her favorite books. I thought he was just being kind. Thought we were helping a young woman find her way. There were nights I'd fall asleep on the couch after grading reports, and I'd wake to the murmur of their voices from the porch, soft laughter carried in through the cracked window. I remember smiling once, half asleep, thinking, God, I'm glad she has someone to talk to. I didn't realize then that I was already being written out of the picture. The first real change came small, like a thread pulling loose from a sweater. Thomas started working later, claiming deadlines. Leah began mentioning him casually in conversations. Thomas said this, Thomas thinks that. At first, it made me proud, 2 people I cared about getting along. But there was something else in her tone, too familiar, too glowing. Then came the lunches. One afternoon, I walked into a cafe near our office and saw them by the window. Thomas was leaning forward, listening intently while Leah gestured with her hands, laughing. His wedding ring caught the sunlight. I stood there for a second, feeling oddly detached, like I'd stumbled into someone else's movie. When Thomas noticed me, he waved casually. "Small world," he said when I joined them. I was just downtown. It was plausible. He often met clients near the city center. Still, Leah looked flustered. Her fork trembled as she picked at her salad. I convinced myself I was imagining things. After all, I trusted them both. But imagination has its own scent, sour, metallic. And once you smell it, it lingers. The next few months blurred. Leah's career blossomed. She was promoted to assistant manager, mostly due to projects we'd built together. I was proud but also strangely uneasy. She started dressing differently, sleek blouses, subtle perfume that lingered in the conference room long after she left. Thomas, meanwhile, became distant. He'd scroll on his phone late at night, smiling faintly at messages he never shared. I told myself it was work. Writers get lost in their words, don't they? Then, one Sunday morning, I caught a name flash across his screen, Leah Sparkles. Just that, her name, and a sparkle emoji. He turned the phone over so fast it almost fell. That day, I stood at the sink washing dishes, my hands trembling under the running water. I watched soap bubbles slide over my wedding ring until the gold looked dull. Something inside me whispered, "You already know." A week later, Leah came to my house unannounced. It was raining, and she was soaked through, hair plastered to her face. She held a flash drive in one hand and a box of pastries in the other. "I finished the client files early," she said, smiling nervously. "Thought I'd drop them off personally." Thomas appeared from the hallway, barefoot, wearing the faded college t-shirt I'd just ironed that morning. His expression froze when he saw her. For one fleeting second, the air changed. I saw it then. The connection, the guilt, the electric pause between them. Leah stammered something about traffic. Thomas said he had emails to send. By the time she left, my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. That night, I didn't sleep. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling fan spinning shadows across the room. Every kindness I'd shown her, every secret I'd shared, it all played back like a cruel montage. 2 weeks later, Thomas told me he was moving out. No shouting, no blame. Just a quiet resignation over morning coffee. "I think we need space," he said. "I don't want to hurt you more than I already have." "Already have?" I repeated. He didn't answer. He packed his suitcase that afternoon, careful not to meet my eyes. When he reached the door, he whispered, "I'm sorry, Diane." And then he was gone. It wasn't until 3 days later that I saw the photo. Someone had tagged Leah on social media. There she was, standing beside him at a literary event, his hand resting gently on her back. The caption read, "Power couple of the night." My phone slipped from my hands. I remember the sound. It hit the floor like something breaking inside me. In the weeks that followed, I walked through life like a ghost. At work, whispers followed me down the corridor. Some pitied me, others avoided me. Leah had taken a leave of absence for personal reasons, which only made the gossip worse. I deleted social media, stopped answering calls, kept to myself. Nights were the hardest. I'd sit by the kitchen window, the same one where I'd once watched Thomas water the garden, and wonder what she had that I didn't. Was it youth? Novelty? Or just timing? People always talk about heartbreak as pain. But for me, it was silence, and unbearable, ringing quiet in every corner of the house. And then, 3 months later, at 2:13 a.m., the phone rang. "Mrs. Diane, it's Leah." Her voice shook. I could hear muffled crying in the background, maybe even fear. For a moment, I considered hanging up. But something, maybe curiosity, maybe leftover compassion, stopped me. "Leah?" I said. "What's wrong?" Her breath hitched. "It's Thomas. He's gone." I sat there, gripping the edge of the counter. "Gone? What do you mean?" "I think he left me," she whispered. "He just packed up and disappeared. I don't know where to go." Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. And just like that, the story I thought had ended found its second act. When Leah said those words, "He's gone," I felt my breath catch in my chest. The irony of it hit me first. The girl who'd taken my husband now calling me for help. But there was something raw in her voice, something that sounded younger than I remembered. I told her to come over. I don't know why. Maybe it was instinct, maybe habit. Maybe I just needed to see her face one more time, to confirm that she was real and not some ghost from my nightmares. It took her 20 minutes to arrive. I heard her before I saw her, hurried footsteps on the porch, the soft, desperate knock that barely sounded like she had the strength for it. When I opened the door, Leah stood there drenched again, rain running down her cheeks like tears. "Come in," I said quietly. She hesitated, her eyes starting around the hallway like she wasn't sure she was allowed inside. Then she stepped in, hugging her arms across her chest. The smell of wet fabric filled the air. I made her tea, because that's what I always did when I didn't know what else to do. She sat at the kitchen table, the same one where we'd once shared pastries and talked about her career. But now she looked smaller. The confident young woman I once admired was gone, replaced by someone brittle, frightened. "He said he needed space," she murmured, fingers wrapped around the mug for warmth. Then he started staying out late. Last night, I woke up and his things were gone. No note. Just gone. I leaned back, my hand trembling slightly as I stirred my own tea. "So now you know how it feels," I said softly. Her eyes filled instantly. "I deserve that." Silence stretched between us, heavy, bitter, familiar. "Finally," she whispered, "he told me you were cold to him. That you stopped caring." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Did he tell you that before or after he kissed you?" Her lips trembled, and I knew the answer before she spoke. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I thought he loved me." I watched her, really watched her. The smudged mascara, the trembling jaw, the way she twisted the ring on her finger like it was a lifeline. And for the first time, I didn't see a rival. I saw a girl who'd fallen for the same illusion I once had, the quiet charm, the promises, the soft-spoken confidence that made you feel like you were the only one who truly understood him. Thomas had always known how to make women feel seen. He just never learned how to stay. Leah stayed the night on the couch. I went upstairs, lay awake, and listened to the storm fading into morning. My mind raced with questions. Where had he gone? Why call me instead of his friends? Was this some twisted test? When I came down at sunrise, Leah was still awake, staring blankly at the window. She turned to me and whispered, "Do you think he'll come back?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I sat beside her and asked, "What happened before he left?" She swallowed hard. We argued. I found out he'd been messaging someone else. He said I was paranoid, that I was becoming just like you, suspicious, controlling. Then he packed up and left. Just like that, the puzzle pieces slid into place. The same words. The same cycle. He hadn't changed. He'd just found a new stage for the same performance. Over the next few days, Leah lingered in my house like a stray cat unsure of its welcome. She offered to leave every morning, but never did. I didn't tell her to go either. There was something strangely healing in having another person around, even one who carried the ghost of my marriage on her skin. We fell into an odd rhythm. I'd make breakfast. She'd tidy up the living room. She'd ask timidly about old times, what Thomas was like when we met, what I'd loved about him. Sometimes I'd answer. Sometimes I couldn't. One morning, she found an old photo album on the bookshelf. It was full of our travel pictures, me and Thomas in Italy, our smiles wide and easy. Leah traced a finger over one of the photos, her voice barely above a whisper. "He said you didn't travel much. That you were afraid of new things." I took the album gently from her hands. "He always rewrites history when he's bored of it." Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, there was no defensiveness, only understanding. A week passed before we heard from him. Leah was the one who received the message. It came at midnight, a short text. "Need some time to think. Don't wait for me." No explanation. No apology. Just that. She showed it to me with shaking hands. "I don't understand," she whispered. "He said he loved me yesterday." I sighed, feeling a strange calm settle in my chest. "That's his favorite phrase," I said. "Yesterday. He loves whoever makes him feel important yesterday." Leah looked at me, startled by the quiet certainty in my voice. I had once believed I was special, that I'd healed him. Now I realized I had only been another listener in his endless need for validation. A few days later, I went into town to pick up groceries. When I returned, Leah was sitting on the porch steps, holding an envelope. "It's from him," she said. Inside was a handwritten letter. His familiar looping script filled both sides of the page. He wrote that he was sorry for the pain, that he needed to rediscover himself, that he'd been carrying guilt for too long. But the part that made my heart stop was near the end. Tell Diane I still think about her sometimes. She was right about everything. I stared at the words until they blurred. Leah watched me carefully. What did he mean? I folded the letter slowly. It means he's done this before. And he'll do it again. That evening, I stepped outside alone. The air smelled like rain and jasmine, the same scent that used to cling to Leah's hair when she'd first joined the office. I stood under the porch light, watching moths flutter toward the glow, burning themselves on the bulb. Maybe that's what we'd both done. Drawn to the warmth of his charm, blind to the burn. Inside, Leah was cleaning up after dinner. I could hear the clinking of dishes, her quiet humming, off-key but sincere. And for the first time in months, the house didn't feel haunted. It felt occupied. Human again. The next day, she asked if she could go back to work. I need to start over, she said. I can't hide here forever. I hesitated. The idea of her walking back into that office, where everyone knew, where whispers would follow her, made my stomach twist. But she was right. You can't heal where you hide. So I helped her update her resume, gave her one of my old blazers, and drove her to the train station. Before she boarded, she turned to me. Thank you, she said softly, for helping me, even after everything. I smiled faintly. Just don't repeat my mistakes. She nodded, her eyes glistening. As the train pulled away, I felt a strange sense of peace. Not forgiveness exactly, but release. For so long, my pain had been tied to hers. Now, maybe, we could both begin to untangle. But healing rarely stays simple. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived, this time addressed to me. The return address was a hotel in another city. It was from Thomas. I opened it slowly, my hands steady this time. He wrote about how everything had fallen apart with Leah, how he realized he wasn't built for long commitments, how he'd always felt trapped by expectations. He said he hoped I'd remember him kindly. At the end, he added one more line. Leah's young, she'll move on. But you always had the strength I lacked. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the drawer beside my bed. I didn't cry this time, because somewhere deep down I already knew. He hadn't left me because I was unloving. He'd left because I was no longer someone he could manipulate. And now Leah would learn that lesson too. 3 months passed before I heard her voice again. Leah. It was a Sunday afternoon, the kind of lazy quiet day where sunlight filters through lace curtains and makes even the dust look peaceful. I was pruning the small garden behind my house when my phone buzzed. Leah, Diane, are you home? I need to see you. It's urgent. There was no hesitation in her tone this time. Just urgency and something else I couldn't place. When she arrived, I noticed she wasn't the same girl who had stood on my porch in tears months ago. Her posture was firmer, her voice steadier. But her eyes, they still carried the flicker of someone who'd been through the fire. I wouldn't bother you, she said, sitting at the edge of my sofa. But you need to hear this. I set down the cup of tea I'd made her, bracing myself. It's Thomas, she said. He's sick. The words hung in the air like fog. Sick. I waited for the sting of pity, the flood of old emotion. Instead, all I felt was stillness. What kind of sick? I asked. Some kind of heart issue, she said. He's been in and out of the hospital. He called me last week. He's staying at a care facility outside the city. I nodded slowly. And what does he want from you? Her lips pressed together. He says he wants to make things right. With both of us. I almost laughed. You think a few apologies can fix years of damage? She looked down, twisting her fingers. I don't know. But he asked for you. By name. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the years we'd shared, the good, the unbearable, the small domestic moments that had once felt eternal. And despite everything, a part of me wanted to see him. Not out of love that had long burned to ash, but for something quieter. Closure, maybe. So when Leah offered to drive me the next day, I didn't refuse. The care facility was a modest building, tucked between a church and a park that smelled of pine and disinfectant. As we walked through the hallways, nurses moved like ghosts in soft shoes. Then we found him. Thomas sat by the window in a plain gray robe, thinner than I remembered. His once dark hair had turned nearly white, and the edges of his face seemed carved out of paper. When he turned and saw us, something like shame flickered in his eyes, quickly replaced by that familiar half-smile. "Diane," he said, his voice fragile. "You look the same." I almost said you don't, but held my tongue. Leah stood behind me, her hands clasped together. He motioned for us to sit. "I didn't think you'd come," he said. "I almost didn't," I replied. He smiled faintly. "You always did have boundaries." I admired that, even when I resented it. I stared at him. "What do you want, Thomas?" He sighed. "To say I'm sorry. To both of you." Leah's breath caught, but I stayed still. He continued, "I hurt you both. I lied, manipulated, ran when things got hard. I thought I was chasing happiness, but I was just running from myself." His words sounded sincere. Maybe they were. But the problem with liars is that even their truth feels rehearsed. After a pause, Leah spoke quietly. "Why no?" He looked out the window. "The doctors say I don't have much time left." There it was, the truth behind the invitation. Guilt, maybe. Or fear. He turned back to me. "I wanted you to know I never stopped caring, Diane. I thought of you more than you'd believe." I felt my throat tighten, but not from tenderness. "You thought of me," I said slowly, "while building a new life with her? While making me the villain in your story?" He flinched. I told myself what I needed to believe to keep going. I wasn't proud of it. I leaned back, folding my arms. "And now you want forgiveness?" He hesitated, his gaze soft. "Not forgiveness. Just understanding." I wanted to be angry. I wanted to throw every word he'd ever used against me back in his face. But something in me had shifted. Looking at him, frail, diminished, no longer the man who once towered over every room, I realized the anger had nowhere left to land. He wasn't the monster I remembered. He was just a broken man facing the end of his story. Leah sat silently beside me, tears glistening in her eyes. After a long moment, I stood up. "You have our understanding," I said quietly, "but not our permission to rewrite the past." He nodded, almost grateful. Outside, Leah wiped her face. "You were calm," she said. "I don't think I could have been." I smiled faintly. "That's because you haven't spent 20 years learning how to hold silence like a weapon." She gave a small laugh, the first real one in months. We drove back in quiet. When we reached my house, she turned to me. "Do you regret it?" she asked suddenly. "What?" "Loving him." I looked out at the fading light, the sky bruised with dusk. "No," I said finally. "Because loving him taught me how to recognize peace when it finally came." Over the next few weeks, I visited Thomas once more. Alone this time. He looked weaker, but his eyes seemed softer. He told me about his childhood, about his father's silence, about the first time he realized he couldn't stand being ordinary. He confessed that he'd always been afraid of women who truly saw him, and that's why he'd chased those who didn't. I listened quietly, not to absolve him, but to understand the story that had once entangled mine. Before I left, he took my hand. "You were always my mirror," he said. "You showed me who I was, I just didn't like what I saw." I squeezed his hand gently. "Then maybe now's the time to stop running from it." He smiled, tired but peaceful. A month later, Leah called again. Her voice was steady. "He passed away this morning." I sat by the window, watching autumn leaves tumble across the yard. For a long time, I didn't speak. Then I said, "Thank you for telling me." She whispered, "He left something for you. I can bring it tomorrow." When she came, she handed me a small box tied with a faded blue ribbon. Inside was a single photograph, the three of us at a company event years ago. Thomas stood between us, his arm around my shoulders, his other hand resting lightly on Leah's. We were both smiling then, unaware of the storm that would follow. Beneath the photo was a folded note. For Diane. You taught me what love looks like when it doesn't need to win. For Leah. You taught me what it means to begin again. Forgive me, if not for what I did, then for how small I let myself become. Leah looked at me, tears slipping down her cheeks. I don't know if I can forgive him, she whispered. I nodded. Forgiveness isn't a gift for the one who hurt you. It's the door you open when you're ready to leave the room. She smiled through the tears. You always know what to say. I laughed softly. Not always. But I've had a lot of practice trying. That night, after she left, I lit a candle and placed the photo beside it. The flame danced over our faces, 3 people bound by mistakes, by love, by time. I didn't cry. Instead, I whispered a quiet thank you, not to him, but to the version of me who survived it all. Because sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't justice. It's peace. Months later, Leah sent me a message. Started my new job today. Feels good to stand on my own again. I smiled. Maybe that's how healing really works, not in grand gestures or final words, but in the quiet rebuilding of a life that once felt impossible to live. And as I looked out the window at the first bloom of spring, I realized something I'd never thought I'd say. He was gone. But I wasn't. I was still here. And for the first time in years, that was enough. When my phone rang that night, I almost didn't answer. It was 2:13 a.m., and the house felt too big for just me. I remember the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock above the stove, and the faint echo of rain tapping against the kitchen window. When I finally swiped to pick up, the voice on the other end trembled. Mrs. Diane, it's me. It's Leah. Leah. The girl I had trained, coached, and practically mothered. The girl who stole my husband. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. Then she whispered, I don't know who else to call. And that was how everything, the pride, the hurt, the years of silence, cracked open again. Normal life/setup. Before all that, my life looked ordinary. Comfortable, even. I was a senior project manager at a mid-sized marketing firm, the kind of place where birthdays meant grocery store cake and long workdays ended with cheap wine in paper cups. I'd worked there 15 years. The office was my second home. Leah joined us fresh out of college, bright-eyed, too eager, with a portfolio full of raw ideas and typos. I was assigned as her mentor. She reminded me of myself when I was 22, hopeful, anxious to please, convinced that kindness alone could get you through the world. I used to call her Kiddo. She'd hover by my desk, scribbling notes while I explained campaign strategies. I'd correct her gently, tease her about her messy bun, bring her coffee when I noticed she'd skipped lunch. My husband, Thomas, often teased me about her. Another one of your strays, he'd joke as I packed extra lunch to bring for her. Thomas was a quiet man. He'd been a literature teacher before switching to freelance writing. His humor was dry, his voice low, the kind of tone that made you lean in to catch every word. We'd been married 13 years. No children, though we'd tried. Instead, our lives filled with routines, morning coffee on the porch, crossword puzzles, long drives on Sundays.